Well, thanks for being here, Mike. This is Mike Zay with TenantBase, joined by Mike Hammond at Tenant Consulting Group out of the DMV, Washington, D.C. area. Mike's a tenant rep broker, and his firm focuses, I think, entirely on tenant representation and has been a tenant-based partner for going on 4 or 5 years now. And so excited to have him and kind of hear his background and his take on the market. So thanks again for joining, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, a lot of good synergies here with how you've built your business practice and kind of helped us shape ours over the last, like I said, almost 5 years now. You were definitely an early adopter of what we do, so it's always fun to catch up and hear kind of your story and more about your process and maybe help some emerging brokers or just other partners of ours across the country. The way we typically start is I'd love to hear you just tell, how did you get started in commercial real estate, tenant rep? Kind of how did you find yourself on your journey here?
So I came out of college and worked for a mutual fund company in Denver. Shortly after, moved to Atlanta and was hired by Julian Studley um, as an analyst back in 1998. They're now Civilis. So I started off doing financial analysis for at the time one office. It eventually became four offices in the region, and really allowed me to see all of the deals that were occurring. So that was very helpful for me to get going. Is working on deals and then you're seeing everything that's occurring. So I did financial analysis for that region, and at the same time, in free time, I got my salesperson license and started, initially calling. So I was at the same time doing financial analysis and seeing kind of what was occurring. So they obviously had a whole group that was canvassing, and so I did that also probably 10% of my time originally.
Okay.
And then right after 9/11, I ended up moving with one of the partners from Studley to the DC area and started focusing, 70% at that time on canvassing new business. And then about 13 years ago, the same group of us spun off and became Tenant Consulting.
Perfect.
And so we focus on DC area primarily. We don't have we have a national network of groups we can reach out to, but as far as tenant consulting, it is in the DC area that we're focused. Um, so that's kind of the background.
Awesome. And so you talked a little bit about like canvassing there. I'm always curious. So, that's 25 years ago, right? When you're getting started and you're hunting tenants. How has that approach changed over the last, let's say the last 5 years relative to what you did throughout your career? And has there been any change in terms of
Yeah,
how?
it's to me it went basically it's pre-COVID and after COVID.
Okay.
And pre-COVID was still very similar to 1998. You could cold call people and you could catch them there. It's become less effective over time, but I always tell people I'm working with that you reach out to everyone in your network you can, and people will you know someone from a golf club, and you reach out to them and they're like, okay, we'll consider talking to you, but we're not looking to do anything for the next year. So no matter what your network is, early on, you always have free time that after you've milled that as best you can, that you can canvas. And so up until COVID, it really worked well. After you have to quickly transition to catching people on their mobile phones at home. And so they're working without gatekeepers, and therefore they're a lot of times not interested in. They're trying to identify who's calling and get rid of them as quick as possible. So we have to kind of switch from cold calling to what I call warm calling, even if it's just in your own mind that you're not cold calling them. You have something to talk about.
For sure. And so when you flip that dynamic, because I mean I see the same thing, and I always give my example of my peers are now good friends growing up in college. They're getting into leadership positions in companies, and we're in our 40s now, early 40s, and so it's fascinating to watch them become the decision maker that's being hunted, right? In a lot of cases. And you just described it very well. We're all exposed to more noise now, I think, than ever. And, obviously that's only going to probably get worse with AI. So when you talk about like warm calling, like maybe pull that back a little bit. Like, is that, like you mentioned your network, is that going to your network and saying, hey, I'm trying to reach Sam. Like, do you know him? Can I get in front of them? Or is it just you're putting more thought into the initial outreach? I guess give me a little more detail there.
Yeah, I would say that is more thought. So back 1998, you might work off a script and call, and you get better at the script, and you can adopt it very quickly. And now we're in a situation where you might call a building, tenant within a building, and let them know that you just restructured their neighbor.
Yeah.
And that's what I call a warm call. Yes,
Okay.
you don't might not know them, but they are interested in hearing what their neighbor did. Um, then you have other sources of following people, keeping track of everyone, and seeing that a client of yours used to work at an organization, and work through that network to try to have dialogue. And if they don't, if they're not interested, then you give them space, and it doesn't mean you give up forever. You just change directions and keep coming.
Yeah, makes sense. And so are you finding it harder? Like it takes more touches, it takes more follow-up right now than historically to get kind of that first interaction, whether that's a true dedicated phone call or meeting. Is that harder to come by right now?
Yes, it is harder to come by. That's one of the benefits of TenantBase is that while you're calling in your traditional method of reaching out, email, whatever it is, just working through your community, whatever you're doing. And so tenant-based layers on top of that, where as you're doing that, you'll get contacted by tenant-based that this particular group is interested, in looking in the region, and then it's just so much better than calling an association who is in a prime building in DC, and they're quite frankly harassed by brokers. And so breaking through that is tenant-based is a nice layer piece on top of everything else you're doing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's a very good point. And yeah, like because I mean, in brokerage, rightfully so, people are chasing known transactions of certain size and caliber, and those are the ones that, like you said, get all the phone calls and all the outreach. So that makes a lot of sense to
And
kind of
yeah, you have to go after those clients. Obviously, you want to always keep your foothold there, but with tenant base, a frequent thing that happens that I found is there'll be a government contractor, and they get a new government contract, and then someone who's never been responsible for real estate, so they're not the CFO to the organization, gets told, "Hey, we've got this new assignment, go find space," and they have not been harassed by brokers. And that's a wonderful client, and you get them, and you just basically immediately start working on the deal. So it's that's the beauty of it, I think.
yeah, the reason to call or the change, those are great inflection points for sales. So you mentioned tracking like your customers, and I'm always curious, like, do you use a CRM kind of or a system to do that and manage your follow-up?
Yeah, I do just a HubSpot, just very simple to kind of keep track with some labels so I don't forget about people. One of the I think the issues, in brokerages, as you succeed, you also, are busier and busier. And what happens is you may have a client that you do a 10-year lease for, and you reach out to them over time, but their growth is steady, and they don't really have a need, and so they're busy. And so, you don't have always a way to keep in contact with them,
Yeah.
when they're busy. And so that's something I work through with that to make sure I'm in, constantly in front of them. It's a 10-year horizon.
Yeah. What just on that specifically, what do you outside of outreach saying, hey, how you doing? Checking in, probably build relationships with your decision makers. Are you sending structured pieces of content, market research, things like that? How do you
I will sometimes use, for instance, use some information from CoStar kind of to support what's occurring. So someone is 5 years into a 10-year lease. A lot of them already aware of it, but I may give them facts that, their buildings just transitioned to new ownership. This is a time that the new owner has a different profile than the previous. So we can, this is the time for you to really strike a deal.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, cool. So, kind of going back to the general stuff. So, you've been doing this for a long time now, especially focused on the tenant rep side. What do you think are some of the things that have kind of like strengths of yours that have helped you be successful in this, and kind of, what's the mindset that you think has led to you, and then what you see in other top performing brokers?
Um, for top performing brokers, you know, I think what you notice is that they all have a specialty. So yes, they can do everything, absolutely, but they're known for being in a certain area of DC, having that area locked down, having a certain clientele where they've done a lot of work and they're comfortable with that. And so when they have an opportunity to get in with another tenant in the same industry, they really have a leg up because so I think that's the trick is there's certain specialties I focus on. Like we do a lot of associations, nonprofits is kind of our bread and butter, government contractors, law firms. We've did Embassy of Sweden. So we have a couple embassies
Yeah.
in our background. And then obviously just your straight corporate work as well. We don't tend to do as much government historically, and again, focus mainly, DC area.
How did you kind of get it? Did that happen naturally, or did you set out with a plan that said, okay, we're going to do, these pillars of our business strategy. We're going to focus on these things. Or did you have a couple wins early and then kind of build around?
Uh, I would say that there's certain clients that are big enough, like a gigantic government contractor has their own real estate department and they know what they're doing. And so they need brokers across the country just for a transactional, send them a survey and take them on tours. When you work with an association, typically their CFO, this is just one thing that they might do, get involved with every 5 years. So they're appreciative of the type of assistance that we give. So it's fun to work with clients that need the help and appreciate it.
Okay, makes sense. And so was that, but that wasn't intentional. You kind of got into that line of work and then kind of grew with it.
When I was in Atlanta, there's limited associations there. So in DC, that's a big part of the business downtown. Every meaningful association and trade association, they have a presence there.
Yeah.
So it's a great client, and so we've just been successful in that arena.
Okay. Makes sense. So if you're looking out, and maybe you guys, I don't think you have any younger brokers in the firm right now. Maybe you do. But what kind of advice would you give to someone, let's say someone who's getting started in tenant rep or looking to get into commercial real estate in general, like as you see it today, what would you say to that person in terms of guiding them to be successful over the next 5 to 15 years of their career?
When I've spoken with people, I've trained various people over the years that the understanding of the length of time that you need, even if you're great, you still need it's a long cycle, sales cycle process, and you really have to be able to make it through that process. And so it's tough for a young person because if you're an organization, you're working with someone that's not producing revenue for 2 years probably. So it has to be really kind of a marriage where they understand that it's going to take time to be successful.
Yeah.
So I mean that's the important part is I always think if you see a young person, and I think the best thing is to be part of a team where you have a place on your team, a role on the team of what you're responsible for, and then you're included in all of everything that goes on. So you basically learn over time, how the business works, what the tenants need, how you achieve it, what the pitfalls are. So I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah. Getting that exposure to deal reps, something that I always hear just like,
Yeah. So if you are doing that assignment, it's really up to you to say to your senior people, hey, when you're exchanging leases, comments on leases, can you send it to me so I can see, what the attorney is commenting and make sure I understand why. I mean, there's a lot that can be done, um, just to learn the business quickly.
yeah.
So a lot of young people, I'll ask them, what is it you're selling? And they'll say, I'm selling, real estate consulting services. And, and what I've said is, you eventually are, but today you're really selling your team. So you can't come in that first year and, build the World Trade Center. I mean, you come in and you're getting meetings for your team to win because every um, time you're trying to get hired, there's another broker also trying to get hired. So you've got to come in with all your guns blazing every time.
Yeah, makes sense. You're really selling like access like you said, to your team, to those services, and then you're bringing the energy, enthusiasm, work ethic to make it happen and build those.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of value in that, obviously. I think sometimes having done that a little bit, for a couple of years, that it can feel exhausting, it can feel low level, but you have to, like you said, you have to see the long term of where that can go, which is you're building a skill set, you're building,
Right. Exactly. And it's important you don't have to BS tenants. You basically, you have a team that can handle these problems and you just want to come in and have a short, respectful discussion, not wasting their time, but going over all of your offerings to, try to find a match.
That's really good advice and perspective. So is there something that, kind of another way of asking the same question is there any piece of advice you've received in your career that really helped shape your thinking on the brokerage business, or anything that kind of was passed down to you by a mentor that's guided you as you've gone, independent over the last, what, 20 years or so?
Someone early on said, and it sounds simple, but they said, if you want to do big deals, you have to call on big clients. And it really is, uh, it's so true. And, it's so hard to market and canvas. So you don't try to win small deals. You may or may not do small deals as you decide if something falls in your lap. But in terms of marketing and spending your effort, it does need to be towards, um, large deals.
Got it. So you really, it sounds like, to kind of frame it, and I have an understanding, but to kind of paint the picture, it sounds like you've really said in your business development mindset that, hey, okay, look, if I'm putting in the effort and energy to target something, it's going to be of this size, shape, stature of company. But I also am going to set up systems over here, our partnership at TenantBase being one of them, maybe some other things, that if deals come to me, they could be of that same quality, but if they come to me naturally and it's a relationship I want to build and work on, I'll do those deals, but I'm going to hunt a very specific profile of tenant. Is that
Exactly. Yeah.
so that's so interesting. So how do you not let the implementation of deals that don't fall into that category, how do you prevent that from cannibalizing the time of what you're really going after?
I think you learn over time that there are tenants who landlords are happy to have. So, um, and there's certain that, new startups that are difficult to find landlords to accept. And so it's a lot of extra time to find kind of a meeting of the mind with those. So when I have, kind of a lead that comes in from TenantBase, I decide, essentially based on the business profile of that group, what they're doing, their financial background, whether this is someone that landlords would seek to have in their building. And that's kind of a marker for me is to determine, to make sure that, you're spending your time in a wise way.
Got it. And so how do those, so if, let's say you implement, some deals that don't fall into your kind of your core customer strategy, how do those benefit you over time? I mean, there's probably some pretty obvious things, but I'm just curious, have you found that to be outside of just the revenue from them, does that support your ability to go win the bigger transactions, or is it just, I guess, how would you frame that?
Absolutely. So, before COVID, a lot of the focus, we were associations, nonprofits, um, downtown. And since COVID, a lot of the expansion has been outside of the Beltway,
Okay.
with flex and warehouse space. And I'm getting those leads from TenantBase, which I haven't that had been my primary focus.
Okay.
And so it's been wonderful in that regard to kind of use the skills that I have to help those tenants. So tenant base kind of shows you where, as a broker, where um, where the volume is and where the need is right now, for the tenants.
Got it. And so that actually was a big, I guess I didn't even understand that coming in, and like even with our working history. Like, so that was a pretty significant change for you then, the COVID transition of kind of,
Yeah, yeah. I think for all brokers it was, and I know some people have struggled during that time, and tenant base has helped me a lot within that kind of reach new markets.
got it. That's great. No, that's very interesting. So kind of in that theme, like what is there something that jumps to mind of like something you've had to work on? I mean, we're all developing all the time. Was there something as you got going in commercial real estate that a skill or professional development that you really focused on to get better at, that's helped you in your career, or something that kind of enabled you to level up in your service?
Yeah, I think one of the things is um, you may have a task that you need to work on, you turning a lease over, for a deal you're in the middle of, but yet you haven't, reached out to new groups that day, kind of canvassing for new groups. And so it's important to, to keep at it and tell yourself that, if this can be done after hours, then I need to delay this work until after hours to make sure I'm, constantly keeping new business coming in. A lot of brokers they get a deal and they work on it and it's over and then they start this cycle again. And I don't think that's an effective way. You have to allocate time to keep the flow of deals coming in constantly.
No, absolutely. And so I know you have partners, but do you rely on a team to do that, or is it kind of something you're personally implementing?
For me, it's more personal. So I have a team and we get together for so certain deals that we're going after, we may pair up
Yep.
for that. Yes.
Okay. Makes sense. And I know you're in a unique market, but I guess both where you are sitting in DC and then maybe a little bit more generally, kind of, we're wrapping up 25. There's plenty of headlines as there always are. What do you kind of see as trends that you think are emerging for 26 as it relates to I guess commercial real estate in general, but probably for the office sector, which I know you've done a lot of work in.
Um, one thing that's of interest and it's something that I've been working towards is um, when there are concessions in the office market, which they obviously are right now for the tenant, it's a tenant's market. A lot of the tenants, instead of taking the traditional concessions, free rent, lower rent, having the landlord do all the build out, so all of that aspect has improved for the tenants. Um, some tenants are basically, instead of taking those concessions, they're just doing a short-term deal. And so there's a sense of fear that, they're unsettled, I guess you might say overall, and um, they're not taking advantage of the fact that they could do a great deal right now.
Got it.
So when a landlord allows you to extend your transaction for 6 months or go month to month, uh, the tenant's like, oh, this is exactly what I need. But in reality, they're losing their edge in the tenant market, and the landlord is hoping things will recover. So it's important that if you have a business that's sustainable and you understand the growth, that you go ahead and take advantage of great terms.
But what have you been doing to help kind of demonstrate that? Because you framed it very well. like, okay, I'm the client, of course I want flexibility. I want these things, in my business, and I can take the easy path, maybe in the more flexible path, but you're my broker and you're telling me, Mike, you're leaving a lot of money on the table. How are you doing financial analysis to show that? Kind of what is the process to educate the client?
Yeah, so I think what you have to do is a client may say to that they would like a 3-year extension, and so I will get that 3-year extension for them as a proposal, but also get a longer term extension, and then do the financial analysis, and I can just put a number on it that this cost you to do 3 years versus 7. You're losing $500,000 of free rent by that decision. Um, and then also, you know, working through with a tenant to understand that if they don't really have plans to shut down operation, then if you can do, because one of the other concessions you can get are termination options. So do a longer term deal. So you get all the benefits of a longer term deal, all the concessions, presuming that you stay. And if you don't stay, well, you have a termination right at that period, and you've gotten a lot of free rent to offset any penalty. So you just really just doing the math so that they understand that there's no reason not to take advantage of the market conditions. Some tenants are, I've been told, we'll only do a 3-year deal. So they only so it's working through for them to understand.
No, that's we see that all the time. I mean, it's like our platform, you take in criteria, and I always talk to our broker partners about it. It's like, look, you got to listen to what they're saying. They're coming at it from a perspective of what they think is best for their business and what they know today. That might be the right answer for everybody, but it's our job in a broker shoes, me less so, but our broker partner's job to kind of educate them on like what you just said. It's like there may be a better path that you haven't explored yet. Let's at least take a look at it. So that makes
Right.
a lot of
And it
sense.
doesn't hurt. Even if the tenant has said that, you've given them what they wanted, and you've also shown them what they could have, and they make the decision.
Absolutely. Well, no, this has been great. One last question for you, just to kind of wrap things up, and I appreciate you doing this. You've mentioned TenantBase throughout the talk here, which I always appreciate. We love the promotion. But I guess going back to you were adding it, to your business. Like, what were you expecting to get? What does it look like for you? And how is that reconciled? Is it what you expected when you were coming into it? And I guess what has it been for you as an independent broker?
So I don't know, I can't remember whether 4 or 5 years, some period,
Yeah.
I got a call from TenantBase, and just because I reach out and contact people, if I get a call from someone and they're talking about a service, like mostly I don't talk to them, but if they say something smart, I agree to take a call and listen. And and I thought through, initial discussions with Tenant Base, and I was like, well, I don't see what I have to lose at all by giving this a shot. I mean, I'm more than happy to, you know, have a percentage go to Tenant Base of a deal that I never was going to have otherwise.
Sure.
And so I started off, kind of built my internal system for, how to figure out the criteria of what's a good group to focus on. And it's after 6 months, I was like, well, this is obviously beneficial. And so this year, I think, is the highest revenue from tenant base so far. So and it's been consistent every year. I mean, there's times at tenant base, July 4th, things slow down. That's fine because I'm gone anyway, but hopefully gone. But
Hopefully.
yeah,
Yeah.
so it's been wonderful for me, and there's no downside. Um, it's just all upside, and then you just work through the leads, and some of them are like, well, that's kind of not really in my wheelhouse, but there are always things that are. And you're talking about getting a lead from someone who has reached out and has been looking for space, and what's beautiful about tenant base is when I call on these groups, I'm not really selling. I'm just kind of starting working.
Yeah.
And that's it, and that's been uh, wonderful. And then throughout the period, I've worked with Canon as my account rep there. And, we have a lot of discussions about, why a certain group I think is a good fit, why others aren't. And he's been very receptive on that. And so he's tailored his initial conversations with groups that he's speaking with, to kind of ask the questions so that when they come to me, I can see clearly, is this somebody that, is a good fit? So that's been, and he's been there the whole time. A lot of organizations, your account reps, when you're a smaller group, account reps are cycling through, but he's been consistent the whole time. Very wonderful to deal with.
That's great to hear. That's great to hear. Yeah, it's a funny dynamic. I mean, we talked about how aggressive the commercial real estate you have to be to find new clients and everything. And what we're so thrilled about is, when we have the right partner broker, like yourself, and we have this market position, we're actually just helping you connect with clients that you want to work with, and that you can help. And, shockingly, those businesses often are missing the mark in terms of finding the right service provider, even with, how aggressive the business development in commercial real estate can be. So it's really fun when you see it matching. And I I think that's the biggest thing going forward is I hope we can just keep being that trusted place that we can kind of connect the broker and the tenant, because it's just awesome to see what it can do, with the right parties in place. And
Absolutely.
hopefully we're getting better at it every year. So no, it's awesome to work with you. Really appreciate the time and the perspective here. And thanks again for doing this. It was
You
great.
got it. Thank you.